Hello and welcome to another DataCube free online training resource session. Again, we are looking at Tableau. This is episode 28, and what we want to focus on today is a few elements within the data source pane. So let's jump into that section now. Now that is always the first tab on your Tableau workbook. Now I've fired up the same workbook we were working on in episode 27 last week, and this time we are concentrating on this, the data source section, but most importantly this kind of connection area up here. So first let's start right in the corner and look at filters. Now filters in this data source pane are basically like master filters. You can filter your whole data set down and look at just specific things. So for example, if we were only interested, if we were a grocery shop and we were in the, say, like the celery department, if that was a thing, so if you could interpret that into like a business area, we might not filter all our data down to just look at celery data or just look at a certain team. Say it might be the marketing team. So just say we were the spinach department so we're just going to keep only data about spinach. You can see it filters our data set down, and when we look at a chart reflecting that, it will then filter down to just be looking at that single part of the data set. So if we look here, we're at 100. Say if I put product against this as well, you'll see we only have one product, which is spinach, or one product which is spinach there, or colour, it would be the same because we've only got that in our data set. Whereas if I took that off again by removing it, go back, you can see our sales have gone up. If I put product back in, you can see how we've now got all our different products, like so. So that's quite an important part of the data set, and if you were missing data and you know someone had been playing around with this, then that might be a good place to check, because it won't show up in your filter pane within a sheet or a dashboard or a storyboard. So it's something to bear in mind. So that's the first section of a kind of 3 areas that we want to look at today. So we've spoken about those overarching general filters, and it's important to know about those. But kind of the most of the session was going to be speaking about these 2 connection types, live versus extract. Now, you'll notice automatically, usually when you import data, that it will be on live. Now, live, in terms of what we usually refer to that word as, can be it can differ. So if you have some data connections which are listed on Tableau website, such as Microsoft SQL Server, an Amazon Redshift database, a Google BigQuery database, and a few others like PostgreSQL, there are some data sources which are live and can be constantly synced to pull in the latest data. So if something in the data set changes, so for example we've moved into the next day, so just say we're back in January 2020, and the 8th comes in and all the data comes, that will automatically get pulled in. Now other data sources like the CSV file will still require a refresh, but you've got that link, you've got a data connection to the file, and it knows where it's located, so when you hit refresh it can just automatically pull that data in, pull it out. Now there are some limitations to live data, such as some formulas or different types of calculations. So for example, live data sets, they rely on the data source for some functions and formulas. So for example, if I wanted to create a median sales as a field, it actually can't calculate that on the fly on a live data set. So you have to create an extract. And that's what this is here. Other things that extracts can do is allow the data to be set at a point in time because they won't be updated, and it allows you to distribute packaged workbooks, which means that whoever receives this workbook doesn't need that link to the data source. So for example, this text file, or if I had into a SQL Server database or a BigQuery or whatever it might be, or whether that's on-premise or cloud, they won't need that direct connection into, because you're creating extra, you're creating a snapshot of data. So how do you create a data extract? So to do this, you must first just click on extract, and that extract will include all data, or you can limit that down with your filters, and you'll notice that nothing really happens. So what you need to do is click on a sheet, or if you didn't have one yet, you'd make a new one, or a dashboard, or whatever it might be. And once you click on that away, which kind of seems counterintuitive, you can then go to wherever you want to save these things. So for example, for me, I wanted to put it in this episode, and it's going to be this Tableau data extract hyper file. So grocery shop extract data, let's call it that, save. And you'll notice that your symbol has now changed from that live connection to the extract. So we're using the extract here. The other way of doing it is to, so for example, for the happiness data set, you can right click and extract data, and that will also then take you to a place where you can save save your data to. So I previously mentioned that on live data connections there are limitations on functions. Now this depends on the source of the data. So for example, percentile function isn't supported by certain data sources, medians aren't by others. This can vary depending on if that is catered for within the live data source. So if you're considering doing more, I don't really want to say advanced for things like percentiles, but kind of more advanced analytics, using different functions, it's worth researching whether they're supported with the live connection before you use them, or especially if you want lots of refreshes on your data. Now I also mentioned that on live connections, it's not always live, there's not always a push sort of pull mechanism, and that scheduled refreshes or manual refreshes also have to happen. So for example, on this 2019 happiness data, it's just from an Excel CSV file, and therefore I'd still have to right click and press refresh on here to make sure that populates. So if I were to make a change in my CSV file, save that file, it wouldn't just automatically appear within Tableau. I would have to actually right click and press refresh. So for example, if I edit the data source on that and I were to change that 0.15 to 0.16, close down that CSV, come back here, I wouldn't necessarily see that number change until I had gone to a sheet, right clicked on that and press refresh on that data source, and then it would pull it through. But that connection is there, established. You wouldn't have to create a new extract of the latest data if you like. So that's the biggest problem with data extracts, is that once you've extracted that data, you can see it's kind of at this snapshot at this point in time. So if you change the data in the data source, you'll then have to re-establish that live connection like that, refresh the data set when you go back to it, say for example in here, and then create a new extract and save it, and then if you were to say package up your workbook, you'd have to then package it up as a new file. So it's a much more kind of long-winded way. So generally speaking, the rule is that if you can use live, I'd use live because it makes life a lot more simple. So that's kind of this week's summary. We've spoken about that sort of master filter and then the two different connection types for Tableau. So I hope that was really useful. We'll be back next week for another episode 29. So make sure you tune in for that. Thank you very much.